When discussing ideas, we are, let's say, interacting systems of thought, where the interaction or the transaction between us as systems of thought hinges or turns on the terms we use. These terms can be, of course, verbal or non-verbal, like the words we use or the tone of these words or the gestures we accompany these words with. But every individual has a particular set of concepts or compounds of concepts attached to these terms that we use in conversations. Now there is a big overlap as to these concepts, but there are slight differences that may turn out to be significant, especially when we misunderstand each other or try to understand one another. Now, for instance, the term human being can connote values, ethics, morality, feelings, consciousness, or consumption, reproduction, all sorts of concepts that are elicited by the specific context we engage in when we are discussing something. But the point is that even in the same context we can have slightly different understandings of the terms, and that's where problems can arise. So a lot depends on what we associate and what we distinguish in terms of concepts. We can associate not only and distinguish not only on a horizontal plane concepts where terms evoke concepts and related concepts, so there is a set of interrelated concepts. This is a horizontal plane, but also on a vertical, hierarchical scale where terms evoke concepts that frame or are framed by other concepts. So here the issue is what presupposes what and what follows from what. So in a sense, every term is embedded within a conceptual coordinate system or a conceptual gestalt, where the density and arrangement of component concepts that stand in a constellation is very crucial when we are discussing some idea. But of course, thought or the activation of these concepts is not something static, so it's not standing in a constellation, but it's a dynamic process. When we engage in a dialogue, it's a dynamic process, and thinking is movement, which is to say that the terms we use trigger trajectories of thought that, depending on the capacities of the individuals involved, engaged in the dialogue, differ with regards to the range or the conceptual scope and reach that these trajectories encompass in one sweep. So this means that a poorly layered thought can be clumsy and overwhelming in its trajectory at the expense of a much more richly textured, nuanced thought with which this poorly layered thought may interact when individuals engage in a dialogue. Yes. Okay, I think an example would be very helpful here. So let's say we are discussing the idea of the self. Now, the self could mean for some people merely something along the lines of feelings, emotions, memories, and all these psychological terms or concepts. Confusing words now, that we are accustomed to. But for others, the self may also be related to more complex ideas like the relationality of the self, or how the self is emerging through othering, the process of othering, through the process of socializing. And not everyone is clear as to what is attached to this term, the self, what concepts are attached to that term. And these concepts can be evoked by the specific context, but not everyone has the same set of concepts attached to this term. So for some people, one term, like the self, can evoke more contexts than for others, which is very important. Or another example, talking of levels, of hierarchical arrangement of concepts. If someone is trying to locate the self and brings in the neurological or biological accounts to try to ground his or her inquiry, he or she may have to realize that trying to locate the self at the level of biological processes is a very problematic one, because the self is not an entity at the same level as the brain is an entity. It has to be understood in its proper context, which is the social environment. And for some people this is clear, but for others it's not, because they don't consider the relevance of levels of discussion. So I don't know if it's meaningful or if you can make sense of all this, but the point is that when we try to understand each other, the important thing is to try to align the structure and the range of the trajectories of thought we bring forth in the act of in discussion, in the act of